News just coming in. It's a big blow to the Tatas in the Singur land acquisition deal. The Supreme Court has slammed the Tatas and the left government of West Bengal. The Supreme Court has said allocation of land in Singur actually set a bad precedent. The Supreme Court said the left government used state power for private purposes, and that, according to the Supreme Court, there was no application of mind in the Singur land acquisition deal. India Today's Anusha Soni now joins me for more on the story. Anusha, take us through details of what the Supreme Court said.
Well, Gaurav, this is clearly a big setback for the Tatas and more for that for the left government. Also, this is a big vindication coming in for Mamata Banerjee. What the Supreme Court has said today, basically talking into 8 points, but there are two broad arguments. First, the allocation of land to Tatas in Singur was illegal, bad in law. No proper survey was done. The views of the farmers were not taken into account, to the extent that the Supreme Court has also said that the compensation which was allotted was not proper in law. The second and the major arm of the judgment today is the fact that the state government acted at the behest of a private company. The Supreme Court has said that the company cannot be read, a public purpose cannot be read into the definition of a company. And the way the then left government had acted, which was in power, was bad. It was a fraud of power. These were the words of the Supreme Court today. Now, there are various points of the judgment on which the judges have not agreed. But the unanimity has been on the point that the acquisition was bad in law, it has been quashed, and within 12 weeks, the over 900 acres of land has to be returned back to the farmers. Politically speaking, a big vindication of stand for Mamata Banerjee and a big setback for Tatas and then the left government.
In fact, Anusha, Justice Gowda had initially also mentioned that while agricultural land can be acquired for industry, it's best to avoid it if it's a multi-crop producing land for industrial activity.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And under, the various state laws, when you acquire an agricultural land for commercial purposes, there are very clear procedures and guidelines which are laid down. These guidelines are laid down for ecological purposes and also for the protection of farmers and the cultivators. Now, one of the major arguments from the judgment has been that none of these guidelines and procedures have been followed. The court also said that the local inspector and its report was not proper. The state government did not consult the local people. Even the circle rate was not taken into account when the compensation was given to the farmers. So the procedure has been given a bypass at every stage. And now that's a very scathing judgment coming from the top court of the country.
And even though, counsel for Tata, Abhishek Manu Singhvi, contended that this was land handed over to Tatas in public interest, the definition of public interest of Abhishek Manu Singhvi wasn't bought by the Supreme Court.
Absolutely, Gaurav, and that definition has been rejected by the Supreme Court, saying that in the definition of the word company, legally speaking, you cannot introduce the concept of public welfare, public interest, and the state cannot act on behest of a private party and go ahead and actually displace people and farmers. There has to be a proper procedure that has to be conducted. Today, the court, with its judgment, has tried to draw a very clear line between what is a private purpose and what is a public purpose. And between both of these, where is the right of the farmer, where is the right of a cultivator and the person working on the ground? Hope this sets a good precedent in the coming time for setting up special economic zones and many other commercial and industrial ventures.
And this verdict, in a way justifies or vindicates whatever Mamata Banerjee had done. She not only passed a law to take over this land, but forced Tatas to move to Gujarat.
Absolutely. I mean, Gaurav, if you remember at that time, much criticism followed, post the Mamata Banerjee agitation that she was anti-corporate, anti-industry, anti-competition. And actually, it's not good for the people of West Bengal. It's not creating jobs. But as far as the merits of this case is concerned, the top court of the country agrees that what the government did at that time, which was in Bengal, which was left parties, was bad in law. And clearly their moves were illegal. And all of these points Mamata Banerjee had raised, saying that, the compensations are not given adequately. The state is acting on behest of a private party. She basically alleged a hand-in-glove situation where the corporates were acting on behalf of the government, and they had completely taken over the state policy. Now all of that today has found a mention from the Supreme Court of India.
Okay, do we know what is the next strategy of Tata Motors, of Tata Industries? Do we know what's the next strategy of the government?
Well, I mean, as far as this land is concerned, Gaurav, as I mentioned, it has to be handed back to the farmers within 12 weeks. It's a judgment which has come from the Supreme Court. So, of course, there is a way forward for a review petition that the Tata Motors can file. However, maximum about 95%, more than 95% of the review petitions are dismissed by the Supreme Court. So there is very little hope, legally speaking. When a two-judge bench from the Supreme Court gives out a unanimous verdict like that,
yes,
it's very rare that any other legal remedy can be taken into account. It looks like a dead end, and this is clearly a victory for the farmers and setback of the Tatas.
Stay with me for a moment, Anusha. I also want to bring in Manas Bhuiyan, a Congress leader from the state of West Bengal. Sir, how do you see this verdict? It's a blow to Tatas. The Supreme Court has slammed Tatas in the left government, saying allocation of Singur land set a bad precedent.
I cannot give a specific comment on the verdict and the observation of the Supreme Court. We have to accept what the honorable judges of the next court has given the direction and the observation. I feel that it is not against Tata, but against the previous left-front government, against the procedural deficit and procedural effect. And now the long fight of the state in Singur case has come to an end today, and I hope both the sides, the government headed by Mamata Banerjee, who has been fighting this issue for a long time for the farmers and for the faulty process of taking over the lands from the people, come to an end, and the justice given to the farmers of Singur.
Sir, stay with me. I also have BJP's Rahul Sinha with me on the broadcast. Sir, how do you look at the Supreme Court verdict? Singur deal scrapped.
देखिए, सीपीएम गलत तरीका से किसान लोगों का ऊपर जबरदस्ती करके वो लैंड इंडस्ट्री के लिए लिया था। उस समय हम लोगों ने सीपीएम का इस काम का खिलाफ प्रोटेस्ट किए थे, लेकिन बुद्धदेव भट्टाचार्य का गवर्नमेंट, उन्होंने जैसे प्रेशर क्रिएट करके एक टाइप किसान से जमीन छीन लिया, उसी बात का स्पष्टीकरण आज सुप्रीम कोर्ट का वर्डिक्ट से आया। जो किसान से जिस तरीका से जमीन सीपीएम गवर्नमेंट ने लिया वो गलत था, और इसके कारण आज सिंगूर में जो किसान का जो क्षति हुआ, इस क्षति के लिए पूरा सीपीएम गवर्नमेंट इसके लिए जिम्मेदार है। हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट का किसान का हित में जो आज जजमेंट आया, उस जजमेंट को हम समर्थन करते हैं, और सीपीएम इसके लिए माफी मांगे पूरा सिंगूर का और राज्य का सारे जनता का पास, इसके लिए मैं भी मांग करता हूँ
कि सीपीएम की सरकार को माफी मांगनी चाहिए उस समय की सरकार को, ये आपका कहना है। अगर आप उस दृष्टि से भी देखें तो ममता बनर्जी ने इसका पुरजोर विरोध किया था, और आज जो ममता बनर्जी कह रही थी वो सही साबित हुआ इस सुप्रीम कोर्ट के आदेश के अनुसार। We've lost that line to Rahul Sinha of the BJP. My colleague Anusha Soni with me. Anusha, are we getting more reactions from either side after the verdict?
Well, clearly there is a victory for the farmers and the NGOs, which had moved the apex court, and clearly we are getting some reactions from that end. Much happiness on the side of the farmers. This has been a big weight for them. As far as Tatas is concerned, we are yet to await a formal response as to what. However, very little has been left to say. The court has ordered for them to hand over this land back within 12 weeks, and they'll have to comply with this order. There is no stay possible on this order, so this has to be complied with. But clearly, as far as the special economic zones are concerned, the policy of the Modi government to boost commerce, trade, and businesses in the country is concerned. this judgment would be very important as to how the SEZ must be set up, what are the procedures that must be followed.
And now there is clarity that the government will have to take people on board, the majority of people on board, before land can be acquired, and the government cannot acquire land. Government cannot be a property dealer. They cannot acquire land and give it to a private industry. Is that clear from this verdict?
Gaurav, government can certainly do that, but however, there are proper procedures which have been laid down.
Stay with me for a moment, Anusha. I have Govt Roy of the TMC who joins me on the broadcast. Sir, this is vindication of your stand throughout?
Yes, this is a total vindication of what we had been saying all along, that basically the land acquisition in Singur for the Tata's nano factory using the 1894 Land Acquisition Act was totally illegal. And then, you know, in 2011, after the Trinamool Congress came to power, we enacted a law to enable the state government to take over the land to give it back to unwilling farmers.
Yes.
Now, this has even broadened the 2006 Act in the sense that it has called the whole land acquisition illegal.
Yes.
So, I think it's a vindication of what we have been saying all along, and it's a big defeat for the then state government which had lost ultimately the elections, and also for other people who are supporting it, for the Tatas who had gone to court
Yes.
against Mamata Banerjee's act for returning the land.
Sir, stay with me for a moment. I have Gurudas Dasgupta with me on the story. Sir, a setback to the left. It's a big, big setback, this verdict.
Hello.
Yes, sir. A setback because the Supreme Court very clearly said that the land acquisition was wrong. The land should be returned to farmers.
It is an important judgment of the Supreme Court. It will have its impact, but what impact it will have, it is difficult to say at the moment.
But this is an indictment of the left government of the times, the way land was acquired and given to Tatas. The Supreme Court found that bad in law, sir.
It is your opinion. Maybe your opinion is right.
Sir, stay with me for a moment. Anusha, isn't this what the Supreme Court said?
Well, absolutely, Gaurav. To factually quote what the Supreme Court has said, that the way in which the acquisition was done is bad in law. It has been quashed, very strong words, to the extent that they have even said that the way state government exercised its power in the Singur land allotment case was fraud of power, quote unquote. I'm quoting the judgment of the Supreme Court of India.
So, Mr. Gurudas Dasgupta, sir, that wasn't my opinion. That was the verdict of the Supreme Court of India, sir.
I understand it is a verdict of the Supreme Court, and it is a very hard. It will have its impact. Everybody should take lesson from all that Supreme Court is saying.
Okay. Govt Roy, do you think that the left is still having trouble accepting this verdict, saying this is your opinion or this is the law of the land? Now that the Supreme Court has said
it does not really matter whether the left is happy or unhappy with the verdict.
Yes.
Because the Supreme Court has given a final opinion, and that is law. And the opinion, the Supreme Court verdict clearly says that the whole land acquisition process was illegal and the land has to be returned to the farmers within 12.
Oh, absolutely. For the moment, Gurudas Dasgupta, Govt Roy and Anusha Roy, Anusha Soni, many thanks for joining me with these inputs on the story. We will continue to track developments on the story very, very closely. It's a landmark verdict by the Supreme Court. We'll get you more on this, of